In a world where people pretend better than they perform, where loyalty is temporary and motives shift like the algorithm, learning to read people is no longer a luxury, it's survival. Today, we're diving into Machiavelli's brutally honest, modern-day blueprint for spotting fake friends, hidden enemies, and dangerous opportunists instantly. Not in ancient courts. Not in old kingdoms. But in your real life, your family arguments, your parenting challenges, your kids' school dynamics, your workplace games, and the business deals that determine your future. If you've ever felt blindsided, betrayed, or manipulated, this is the guide that finally hands you the power back. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and share this with someone who needs to open their eyes, because today, we're revealing everything they hoped you'd never notice. If your child suddenly starts boasting about an A on a group project while refusing to share who helped them, Machiavelli would watch the pattern rather than the moment. He would sit through the awkward family dinner, listen to the tone, observe who changes the subject, and note which relatives suddenly praise the achievement and which stay silent. In a household, the true test of loyalty is not applause but consistency, who checks homework routinely, who offers constructive questions instead of flattery, and who only shows up when there's a cake. Machiavelli in 2025 would quietly map those interactions, then act, privately rewarding the child's real work with trust and redirecting credit where it's earned, while distancing the parent who only shows up for the highlight reel. His move would be surgical: cultivate the honest contributor and reduce the influence of the performative supporter, because in parenting the long game is shaping character, not winning applause. When siblings begin to pick fights over chores, Machiavelli wouldn't take the yelling at face value. He would catalog the escalation pattern and test motives with small, revealing favors. He'd assign a mundane task to see who avoids it, who completes it with silent resentment, and who sabotages another's effort. In family arguments, the person who loudly proclaims fairness while never volunteering for the small, invisible burdens is signaling self-interest, a modern sign of a fake ally. Machiavelli would confront this not with moralizing but with reallocation, give responsibilities and privileges to those who consistently bear burdens, and publicly honor the reliability that quiet people show, thus reshaping family incentives. At a school parent-teacher night, a parent who praises the teacher in public but privately badmouths classroom rules is being taught a lesson by observation alone. Machiavelli would take note of which parents ask useful questions about pedagogy versus those who only want to lobby for exceptions for their child. To him, educational prowess shows through responses to structure. The child who thrives under boundaries and the parent who respects them are reliable. The child who wins only when rules are bent, and the parent who insists on constant exceptions, will create future instability. He would advise teachers to reward consistent rule following and to expose favor seekers with calm, recorded policies, not humiliation, but unavoidable documentation of pattern. When a teenager's grades spike suddenly after they join a new study group, Machiavelli would not celebrate immediately. He'd investigate the social economy of that group. Who benefits from the child's rise? Who gains status when the child performs well? Machiavelli would test the group by introducing small, anonymous prompts, an extra assignment, a deadline shift, to watch who adapts and who deserts. In modern schooling, alliances are transactional. Classmates who are loyal when grades matter reveal where incentives lie. He would coach the student to keep resources diversified, protect their access to honest tutors, and avoid becoming indispensable to manipulative peers who will later demand favors. In a workplace meeting where a coworker loudly supports your initiative but then undermines the rollout with nitpicking emails, Machiavelli would label that person an opportunist and design a countermeasure that's invisible to them. He'd document the promises, set checkpoints, and publicly record contributions so the underminer cannot later steal credit. He would also offer them a small, visible task that requires follow-through, their failure will prove their unreliability without a public confrontation. In modern offices, Machiavelli's method is transparency plus leverage. Make the truth discoverable and use projects to reveal character. If a manager smiles benevolently in public but scapegoats subordinates when metrics slip, Machiavelli would treat them as a risk to your career and act like a chess player. Protect your pieces and avoid aligning your fate with theirs. He would quietly build relationships upward and laterally, ensuring no single person controls your future. When necessary, he'd cultivate allies who can testify to your contributions. In a modern corporate ecosystem built on LinkedIn reputations and performance reviews, reputational capital is the currency. Machiavelli would encourage you to invest steadily in others' records and collect documentation that highlights your role. When a colleague aids you during crunch time but disappears when recognition is shared, Machiavelli would test reciprocity with small, costless opportunities to see if they give back. He'd invite them to contribute to a low-stakes but visible task and measure whether they value partnership or merely the spotlight. In the age of collaborative software and version control, Machiavelli would use metrics, contributions, commit histories, meeting notes, to determine whether the person is a true collaborator or a serial approver. Then he'd reassign credit publicly to those who consistently contribute and shrink the platform given to habitual freeloaders, during business negotiations where the other party insists on vague "trust me" assurances. Machiavelli would request specifics and back his requests with concrete conditions rather than emotions. He'd ask for staged deliverables, escrowed funds, and independent validation. If the counterpart balks, the mask falls away. In modern deals, where reputation is traded for speed, false partners resist structures that slow them down. Machiavelli would push for binding milestones and third-party audits, not to be difficult, but to expose intent. His principle, bureaucracy is a diagnostic tool. Requests for simplicity often hide opportunism. If a parent pushes a child into extracurriculars for the social cachet rather than the child's growth, Machiavelli would notice whose image is being curated and who gains status from it. He would observe how the child reacts under pressure, empowerment or exhaustion. He'd then reorient rewards to skills and resilience, not trophies. In modern parenting, stage-managed success creates brittle competence. Machiavelli would strip the performance down and test the child with unfiltered tasks that require real effort, rewarding true mastery over manufactured prestige. When a business partner proposes a last-minute change to a contract that benefits them disproportionately, Machiavelli would not react emotionally. He'd simulate outcomes. He'd model the consequences, ask targeted questions that reveal whether the change is desperation or strategy, and then counteroffer terms that make the proposal unattractive and less balanced. Modern contracting tools make this easier: insert clauses, conditional payments, and precise timelines. Machiavelli would treat the negotiation as an information game. Every refusal, every concession is data to be converted into leverage. In family arguments, when one relative claims hurt but wants to escalate publicly on social media, Machiavelli would recognize the hunger for spectacle. He would refuse to be baited into a threatened war and instead craft a private de-escalation that records the dialogue but keeps the playbook for later. He'd use the moment to test sincerity. Does the relative accept terms to repair the relationship, or do they demand a performative victory? In the modern era of viral grievances, Machiavelli would advise settling quietly when possible and only engaging publicly when the payoff is greater than the reputational cost. When an employee stays late and appears devoted but never owns mistakes, Machiavelli would read that as theater. He'd evaluate whether the person uses time as signaling, not productivity. He would assign tasks with measurable outcomes, then celebrate accountability publicly. If they cannot deliver under clear metrics, he would limit their exposure and redistribute responsibilities to those who consistently show results. In contemporary workplaces where busyness is rewarded, Machiavelli's trick is to convert busyness into measurable indicators. Hours aren't loyalty, outcomes are. If a business associate gifts expensive dinners before a major pitch, Machiavelli would recognize a classic investment tactic: buying goodwill ahead of leverage. He'd accept graciously but not without constraint, moving the conversation immediately to terms and documentation. He would not reciprocate with equal ostentation. Instead, he'd accept the social ritual, then request written confirmation and conditional terms, ensuring the gift is merely social veneer, not binding influence. Today's bribes are subtler, and Machiavelli would neutralize them by institutionalizing the deal and making nothing rely on a mood or meal. When a child confesses a failure and some parents respond with quick reassurance while others with probing questions, Machiavelli sees who fosters resilience and who fosters delusion. He would reward the parent who uses the confession to teach accountability, framing the mistake as data for improvement, not identity failure. In modern parenting, empathy without structure creates fragile kids. Machiavelli would recommend combining understanding with explicit corrective steps so the child learns to adapt. This is how real character is forged, not by coddling. If a team member publicly champions radical ideas but privately resists implementation, Machiavelli would call them a performance activist, one who loves theory but fears execution. He would set them concrete pilot programs that force real decisions and expose avoidance. In today's startup culture where vision can mask inertia, Machiavelli would convert rhetoric into prototypes and watch who stays to fix bugs. Those who flee the mess are not allies, they are branders. He'd reallocate equity and responsibility to those who actually ship. When a parent bribes cooperation with electronics during family crises, Machiavelli would see transactional conditioning that undermines intrinsic motivation. He would stage a controlled withdrawal: fewer instant rewards, more earned privileges tied to consistent behavior. Modern children learn patterns quickly, if compliance is purchased. Rebellion is permanent. Machiavelli's strategy is to reset the reward matrix so that respect and participation are habitual, not currency-driven. If a boss offers to mentor you but never schedules time, Machiavelli would interpret mentorship promises as social signaling that incurs low cost for them. He would respond by asking for a specific agenda and measurable milestones. If the boss cannot commit, the relationship lacks substance. Machiavelli in the modern office treats vague offers as illusions and constructs comparators. Who else can mentor? What documented outcomes will exist, so that empty promises become visible and lose their luster? During a multi-party business deal where one stakeholder consistently changes the scope, Machiavelli would suspect opportunism and set a trap. Require written change orders and incremental approvals that trigger financial adjustments. He would expose scope creep by making it costly and visible, turning the manipulator's tactic into their own expense. In contemporary deal-making, agility is prized, but Machiavelli's rule is clear: flexibility must be earned, not weaponized. If a family member alternates between heroics and disappearances, dramatic rescuing of crises followed by long absences, Machiavelli would view them as unreliable but potentially useful. He would create roles that cap their influence but extract value during their high engagement windows, ensuring the family doesn't collapse during their absences. Modern relationships can monetize bursts of energy. Machiavelli would structure responsibilities so that no single personality can destabilize the household. When students form alliances around shortcuts, sharing answers or pooling test copies, Machiavelli would map who profits and who risks. He'd create assessments that reward individual mastery and make cheating visibly costly, perhaps through oral defenses or randomized problem sets. In today's education systems where collaboration and assessment often conflict, his approach is to make competence undeniable. Evidence-based grading and transparency expose freeloaders and lift genuine achievers. If a co-founder cloaks personal debt issues behind charm and charisma during funding rounds, Machiavelli would see this as a long-term threat to the venture. He would insist on financial disclosures, independent audits, and contingency clauses in the shareholder agreement. Modern startups are fragile ecosystems. A charming liar can poison product-market fit with financial mismanagement. Machiavelli would pivot equity control, implement vesting cliffs, and force accountability structures that survive charisma. When a neighbor repeatedly borrows tools and never returns them, Machiavelli treats these petty violations as early indicators of greater entitlement. He'd start with a polite system, documented loans, scheduled returns, and small penalties. If the behavior continued, he'd escalate to social consequences, reduce trust, public record among the community, so the cost of taking without reciprocating rises. In today's hyper-connected communities, social enforcement is fast and merciless. Machiavelli would weaponize it as deterrence. If an employee undermines your credibility by casually sharing half-truths in client conversations, Machiavelli wouldn't rant. He'd correct facts publicly and formally, then tighten communication protocols. He'd implement pre-approved talking points and shared client notes so misinformation no longer travels unchecked. Modern reputations are fragile. Machiavelli's cure is not confrontation but system design that makes distortion inefficient and traceable. When a parent uses favoritism openly, praising one child and ignoring another, Machiavelli would predict long-term fractures and plan remedial equality that rewards effort, not affection. He'd craft rituals that distribute recognition and responsibility and avoid grand public displays that cement comparisons. In contemporary families where social proof matters, Machiavelli would minimize public ranking and maximize private, consistent expectations to foster cooperation rather than competition. If a vendor keeps promising one last fix and the deadline slips repeatedly, Machiavelli reads that as either incompetence or manipulation. He would move to incentives, tie payments to milestones, set penalties for delays, and create transparent progress dashboards. In modern procurement, promises without penalties are a lie. Machiavelli would rewrite the contract so the vendor's incentives align with delivery, converting wishful assurances into enforceable realities. If you've watched this far, then you already know the truth. Most people reveal themselves long before they think they do, and Machiavelli's modern lens exposes every motive hiding beneath the surface. Whether it's parenting, school dynamics, workplace politics, or business negotiations, these psychological patterns repeat everywhere. The goal isn't to become paranoid, the goal is to become powerful. To stop being manipulated. To stop being surprised. To finally see reality as it is, not as people pretend it to be. If this breakdown opened your eyes, then help it open someone else's. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share this video with anyone who needs to protect their energy, their time, and their future. Stay sharp, stay aware, and I'll see you in the next one.